You're listening to Cool and Unusual Punishment. This is an epilogue to our first season on the Music Man of Eau Claire. My name is Tyler, and joining me tonight, Jody, how are you?
I'm good.
We are well into the police report regarding a financial investigation. Do you want to take it away?
I do.
Okay.
So we have been going through basically a bunch of subpoena results about different transactions. What is this? What was it used for? That kind of thing. So we're just going to keep going with that. Mm-hmm. The next one is a subpoena that was returned on 2/10 of 2020 for Rise Credit. In reviewing bank records from Royal Credit Union, I observed there were several payments or attempted rejected due to non-sufficient funds in account to Rise beginning in July 2017. Due to insufficient funds in the account, it appeared on one payment for $530.89 that actually went through, and the remainder were rejected as non-sufficient funds. I searched online and observed Rise Credit was a loan company.
2017, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
On 2/11/2020, I received an email response from Lyft. I contacted Lyft about attaining the actual addresses for the pickups and drop-offs. So there's a bunch of transactions, and she wanted to know.
Right.
I used a conversion calculator online to use the latitude, longitude. In reviewing through the pickup drop-off locations, I observed frequently an address was blank in Eau Claire. That was his home address. Some of these pickup drop-off times were in the middle of the night. Some were listed in locations in California when Luginbilled had attended the Pride Parade. Some were in Washington, D.C. When I had spoke with a former employee of the Children's Foundation, I asked if other employees were permitted to use charitable funds for Lyft rides to or from the foundation or other event locations for the foundation, and they stated not to their knowledge and that they had not been granted that option. Based on the above information, it appeared Luginbilled had been using charitable funds to cover the cost of various Lyft rides he had taken to and from various locations, with one of the most frequented locations being his residence. Most places of employment do not pay for its employees to travel to and from work or other work locations by use of Lyft.
To be fair, his house is also the branch office for the foundation. Do we know of any foundation employees that aren't family members? I mean, maybe it's not relevant. I'm just curious.
Well, there were people employed by the foundation for limited periods of time, for not very long.
Sure.
As a result, it appeared Luginbilled had been using these funds for his personal use. Now we are moving on to interviews. So the first interview is labeled Contact with Artist Cray from the Andrew Cray Memorial Scholarship. This happened on 3/27 of 2020. During the course of this investigation, I was advised to speak with Artist Cray, who was the mother of Andrew Cray from the Andrew Cray Memorial Scholarship. I asked Cray to explain her involvement with the Andrew Cray Memorial Scholarship and Luginbilled Children's Foundation. Below is a synopsis of my contact with Cray. I think it is important to note that the Cray family is a very large deal, and that Artist Cray, a very prominent lawyer in this area. In speaking with Cray, she indicated Joe Luginbilled had reached out to her in October 2016 as he had read their daughter's book and wanted to help set up a scholarship fund and Andrew Cray's name. Cray stated she was interested in doing something like this to honor her son. Cray indicated she never signed a written contract with Luginbilled and everything had been verbal. She told Luginbilled she didn't want to have any involvement with the monetary aspects or picking of recipients for the scholarship fund. Cray stated to her knowledge, there had been 3 events focused on fundraising for the Andrew Cray Memorial Scholarship. Each would have been in April or May of 2017, 2018, and 2019. Cray stated, due to all that had happened with the news media and Luginbilled Children's Foundation, she is still trying to work out what will happen this year. Cray advised she is trying to continue the scholarship through the Andrew Cray Higher Education Fund to separate it from the Luginbilled Children's Foundation. I asked Cray about financial aspects that she knew of with the Luginbilled Children's Foundation Andrew Cray Memorial Scholarship. Cray stated she was not involved, other than what she had heard from Luginbill. She had been told the first event raised about $15,000, and the events in 2018-2019 had raised about $7,000 and $5,000. Cray mentioned Luginbill had seemed really distracted this last fall, and she hadn't had as much contact with him. Cray advised the last time she heard from Luginbill was about a week or so ago, when he texted her saying he would send her the remaining funds left in the scholarship account. Luginbill had told her the Andrew Cray Memorial Scholarship was in a separate account from his other charities, but she did not currently nor previously have access to the funds. So, I guess getting things in writing is a good thing.
It must be frustrating to be like, I give you my blessing, I don't want to be involved. I wasn't involved financially, I know very little about that, and yet this foundation that I was barely involved with is like an anchor around the neck of my son's memory that I can't separate myself from.
100%.
Oh, boy.
Contact with Nicholas Poss, Music Education Fund, 4/14/2020. In reviewing bank records for Luginbilled Children's Foundation, there was a charter bank account number that was labeled Music Education Fund. The signers listed on this account were Joseph Luginbill and Nicholas Poss. I located a phone number for Nicholas Poss and was able to speak with him via phone on 4/14/2020. Below is a synopsis of my conversation with Poss. In speaking with Poss, he explained he had first met Joe Luginbill in 2016-2017 through another program. Poss stated that he, Poss, bought the Eau Claire Music School and started the Chippewa Valley Youth Chorus. Poss indicated when a new director came in, she had wanted the children to be able to attend for free, so Poss reached out to Luginbill to see if he could assist in setting up a fund. Poss stated the Music Education Fund fell under the umbrella of Luginbilled Children's Foundation. Poss indicated he only had access to the Music Education Fund bank account, which was through Charter Bank. Poss stated he had no access to any of the other accounts. Poss stated the purpose of the Music Education Fund was to raise money for the Chippewa Valley Youth Chorus. Poss stated within 6 months they had not been having a good relationship with Luginbill. Poss advised Luginbill was extremely difficult to get a hold of and sometimes would not contact him back. Poss indicated he was supposed to be completely in charge of money in the Music Education Fund. However, Luginbill had online access and had made several online transfers in fall 2019 without Poss's permission. Poss explained that he had possession of the checkbook and was the person issuing checks from the account, but Luginbill still had online access.
Now we're getting into real, hands and cookie jars.
Poss stated between August to November 2019, there had been 5 online withdrawals from the Music Education Fund account totaling $586 that he, Poss, had not authorized. Poss stated he contacted Luginbill about this. Luginbill stated there had been some sort of error and put the money back. Poss stated he received the bank statements and saw as of January 23, 2020, there had been $597.67 left in the Music Education Fund. Poss indicated even prior to much information being circulated in the news media about Luginbilled Children's Foundation, he had been trying to separate the Music Education Fund from Luginbilled Children's Foundation. End of report.
This seems a little different in terms of a lot of what we talked about the first time around involved like Joe being in control of the narrative. This is like slipping money out of someone's wallet, and then when caught, like what an error. Here's the money back. Like it feels like something you'd want to distance yourself from, I guess.
Yeah, it is most certainly. This is one of those few times where this is a group that approaches you thinking you are an established 501c3. We want to fundraise. You have that set up. And then this all unravels. I mean, listen, I have approached everything about this for obvious reasons from a place of fact. And like, I try not to infer much because you don't even need to.
The dots aren't far apart. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, you know, when there's more than one transaction that is not something you authorize, that is like one hell of an error.
Yeah. $500 isn't a small amount of money to be slipping out of someone's like organization account.
Yeah. Of course, there's all of these situations going on, right? That have happened that we covered. At the time, I think these people, it's to them singular.
None of those have the data point of like, it was my bank account being drained.
Right. Okay. Contact with Sandra McKinney, 4/14/2020. In reviewing Luginbilled Children's Foundation bank records, I observed there were 3 payments made to Sandra McKinney. One was dated 1/29/2017 for $1,000. There's one 3/4/2017 memo line payday with a smiley face for $1,000. One dated 10/29/2019 with memo line donation reimbursement for $10. I also observed in documents obtained from Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions that Sandra McKinney was listed as an incorporator in the initial filing of Luginbilled Children's Foundation in 2016. However, in subsequent years, her name was not listed. I spoke to her via phone on 4/14/2020. She prefaced the conversation by explaining she was a retired minister and Joe Luginbill and his family attended her church. She stated as a result, some of the information she had was privileged and she would not speak about that. I asked McKinney to explain what she was able to share. McKinney indicated her role for the Luginbilled Children's Foundation had been, quote, spiritual advisor. When I read that, my question was, how many nonprofits have a spiritual advisor? I couldn't really find information. You know, this is irregular. McKinney indicated Luginbill had concerns for children, the LGBT community, and those aging out of foster care. McKinney stated she had not helped Luginbill create or develop Luginbilled Children's Foundation. She was simply there for support. I asked McKinney if she was aware she was listed as an incorporator for the Luginbilled Children's Foundation through Wisconsin DFI. She stated she was not aware of this. I asked McKinney if she was paid for her services as a spiritual advisor. McKinney stated she was not. McKinney stated she may have received some smaller payments from Luginbill, but nothing over $1,000. Now, number one, it's interesting to note that she wasn't aware she was listed as an incorporator. Number two, I must be poor enough to think to myself, $1,000 is not. And also, what was she being paid for, if not for being a spiritual advisor? McKinney commented that Luginbilled had lived with her for a period of time. Last February.
Asked and answered. Okay.
McKinney stated she thought there was a lot of misconception in the community pertaining to Luginbilled and the charity funds. McKinney stated Luginbilled never seemed to have much money, and certainly not the hundreds of thousands that many people thought. End of report. Supplemental narrative. Phone contact with Dennis Luginbilled. On 5/22/2020, I attempted to make phone contact with Joe Luginbilled in reference to follow up on this case. I located a phone number in-house for Luginbilled. I tried this number and found it was no longer in service. I then located Joe Luginbill's father, Dennis Luginbilled, who had a phone number. Look, the number of times we have had people try to call this guy. On 5/22/2020, I called and I left a voicemail for Dennis Luginbilled to call me back, as I was trying to get in contact with Joe Luginbilled. Dennis did call me back later that day. Below is a synopsis of my conversation. In speaking with Dennis, he informed me he had passed along my phone number to Joe, and he expected that Joe would be giving me a phone call back yet this afternoon. I asked Dennis what Joe's direct number was. Dennis provided it. I asked Dennis if Joe was still living in Wisconsin. Dennis indicated Joe was now living in Washington, D.C., and he was unsure if Joe had plans to return to Wisconsin. Dennis asked if there was anything he could help with. I advised Dennis I was calling about the Luginbilled Children's Foundation, and based on what I had seen on the Luginbilled Children's Foundation website, it appeared he, Dennis, and other family members were part of the board. Dennis stated Joe had asked if he could put them in as board members, which he stated was fine, but ultimately Dennis indicated he did not have any involvement with the foundation.
And stated he was trying to distance himself from Joe Luginbilled as much as possible. It sure seems like anytime she gets a hold of somebody, it's like, I didn't know this was happening. She asked for the time, and I don't know why I'm an incorporator.
I asked Dennis if any of the other family members that had been depicted on the website as being board members had been involved with the foundation. Dennis stated they were not. Dennis indicated he and his wife helped out with some events by providing music, but other than that, they were not involved. I asked if he or his wife had loaned Joe any money for the foundation. Dennis stated, quote, "No, not really." I asked Dennis what he meant by not really. Dennis commented about a parent helping out their child, but not to a great degree. He also commented about the finances of the foundation, the extent to where financial things had gotten. We had no idea about any of that. I asked Dennis if he, his wife, or other family members had any financial access to the bank accounts for the foundation. Dennis stated they did not have access to any of it. I asked Dennis how the foundation had come into fruition. Dennis stated it had all been Joe. Dennis commented on how he was a teacher and had never heard of someone creating a foundation before. I asked Dennis if Joe had expressed any struggles with the foundation to him. Dennis stated there had always been struggles off and on that always pertained to money. Dennis stated he had no idea about the agreement Joe had with Mo, owner of the State Theater, pertaining to utilities. Dennis commented that he thought Joe was always hoping he'd make enough money to make it go.
These are the responses I would expect from a father. Like, he seems supportive and also kind of in the dark. To have that reaction from his father, too, like, oh, I don't really... You would think you would get answers there.
Yeah, and when you have a nonprofit and you have a board for a nonprofit, that board is supposed to function as a board, right? It's not supposed to be like, I'm doing this all myself. I'm going to have you guys say you're these different roles. That alone is not okay to do. And I don't know if that just wasn't realized by anybody in the family, but once you are okay with your name being the treasurer of a foundation, which is now being investigated for embezzlement.
Foundation? Like, who knows?
Yeah, it's...
You are tied a little closer to this than you seem to be.
Yeah, and he lived there because that was listed as his address. There's all these Lyft rides, and let us not forget that there were checks made to his mother that were labeled as reimbursement.
Yes.
So certainly money was loaned to him, and it was thousands of dollars. I asked Dennis if he, his wife, or any of his other children received money from Joe on behalf of Luginbilled Children's Foundation for anything he did. Dennis stated he was the only one to receive money from Joe, and that was because Joe had hired him to write music for the children's show that Joe had been creating. Dennis indicated that it had not been a lot of money, as he, Dennis, was mainly doing it to help Joe out. Dennis stated Joe did pay numerous musicians to come into a recording studio to record music. Carol Olson, Adam Bowl, Evan Biddles, Jeff Cowell, Jeremy Betcher, and a few others. I asked the time frame of when this recording was taking place. Dennis indicated it occurred over a few years on and off, but believed it began in summer 2017. I clarified with Dennis that Joe would not have paid his wife for anything. Dennis stated she would not have received any money from Joe.
This was for the kids' show? That's what this music thing was about?
Yeah.
And it was on and off over a few years? It was a Beatles record?
Dennis then asked me how long this investigation had been going on. That makes me go, oh, God. On and off for a few years. I advised Dennis the investigation mainly started in October 2019. Then, with the information that came forward at the beginning of 2020, there were concerns about Joe misappropriating money. Dennis stated he knew there was never much money coming into the foundation. Joe had not been taking a salary or making any money from the foundation to his knowledge. I asked if he knew if Joe had been reimbursing himself for various things. Dennis indicated there may have been some things, but he knew Joe was putting in many hours with the foundation and was not being compensated for it. I asked Dennis if he knew of Joe using any of his personal money to pay for charity expenses. Dennis stated, quote, "Not that I remember. I think he tried to keep it separate as much as he could." On 5/22/2020, after speaking with Dennis Luginbill, I did receive a phone call from Joe Luginbill. Below is a synopsis of my conversation with Luginbill. I advised Luginbill I wished to speak with him about the Children's Foundation to obtain further information from his perspective about the foundation and what its purpose was. I asked Luginbill how the charity was started. Luginbill stated in 2016 he had been working as a caseworker through Eau Claire County, and during this time he observed certain gaps in services in the community that he wanted to rectify. One of these gaps was homeless young adults that had aged out of foster care. Luginbill stated he wished to do something about this. Luginbill stated he had been involved in various organizations in the past, and he wished to take on his, quote, passion project. He indicated it started rather small and should have remained that way, but as time went on, he received many different requests from different initiatives. Luginbill stated he wanted to say yes to everything, but Luginbilled Children's Foundation, which is referred to as LCF, eventually reached a point where it became unmanageable. with the different requests and the promises they were trying to make. He indicated they weren't able to do certain things because they were not receiving the funds support to do it. He stated LCF became unsustainable. He commented he did not have training to run an organization of that size. He indicated that he wasn't asking for help like he should have because he thought he could do it all himself. Luginbilled indicated he took on too much too soon too fast with all of LCF.
If all these initiatives are coming your way, wouldn't money come along with that? You'd think you would have some capital if he was getting all that.
Yeah. I think one of the takeaways from all of this that I can't help but have is that ultimately not a lot was going on, but there was the illusion that a lot was going on. Luginbilled stated he had to shut down his own social media, change his phone number, and move out of Eau Claire due to so much negativity he received as a result of LCF falling apart, and he, quote, retreated to focus on his mental health. He stated it created a space for the community to assume the worst. I asked Luginbilled if he felt he was in a better mental state now to discuss what occurred with LCF. Luginbilled stated he felt he was not in a perfect state, but he needed to make sure everything with LCF was officially resolved, and speaking with me was a part of that. I asked Luginbilled if he had ever financially compensated the volunteers he mentioned having with LCF. He stated no. He didn't feel LCF was the size of an organization where they would need to have something like that. Luginbilled commented that looking back, those are things I wish I had. And that's referring to a log or record of transactions. Luginbilled stated that if there was some sort of invoice or receipt, he would try to reference that on the payment. I asked him if he had kept copies of invoices. He stated he kept copies of some invoices. Luginbilled stated, the record-keeping system was not really something that I was good at. I advised Luginbilled I had observed on the LCF website that his family members were the board members of LCF. I asked if this was accurate. Luginbilled stated they were the board in the sense that they would have an annual meeting, which would be a call to them and email update. There are certainly a lot of people listening to this that are somewhat familiar with nonprofits, work for a company in which there is a board and it's a nonprofit. Like there is a real function that is supposed to happen with the board for a nonprofit. It is not supposed to be a deal where you are the sole person making all decisions. That is where you're supposed to get your help from.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be people who are good at the specific tasks they are delegated.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, certainly there were initiatives going on, but were these consuming the everyday of this organization? I don't think so. I think it felt like there was so much going on because he was the only person doing it. A question I have, of which I don't have an answer, is was that intentional? Because when you don't have a real functioning board, you don't have checks and balances, and is that what you're looking for? I asked him if his parents had assisted him financially with LCF. He stated they had not. They had assisted, quote, in kind by providing music for events and helping him organize things. I asked him if he ever paid his siblings or parents for any LCF services. We must remember these checks to his mother, which nobody seems to want to acknowledge so far. He stated he had paid his father for some music he had done for LCF. I will say this, because we just read the interview with his dad, this feels like there's some sort of agreed upon narrative that's going to be shared.
Yeah. My thought was that it feels so small that when you finally get a detail that seems concrete. I paid my dad a little bit of money to work on a song. Anytime someone asks you about payments, you're both like, there was that song you worked on. That's real.
It's that's the one thing that we've heard. And, in the course of this investigation, there's no check for his dad.
Yeah.
And we have a question mark over these checks to his mother that are not just $100. And nobody wants to talk about it. Luginbilled stated if his mother had purchased some cleaning supplies to clean something for LCF, then he would reimburse her. But that was the extent of any financial compensation for his parents. That is not true. There is no way.
Joe, I brought you some laundry detergent.
Like
$2,000 worth.
That's not cleaning supply dollar amounts.
No.
I asked Luginbilled if he had ever commingled any of the LCF funds with his personal accounts. He stated he had not. He stated the only charity funds going into his personal account would have been reimbursed to himself, which would have only been in the form of a check with something listed in the memo line. He stated he was not employed by LCF, so he was not receiving paychecks. He commented how LCF was a side project for him, and there had been times when he would donate some money to LCF. He stated he had only done this a couple of times. He commented that he did not have a lot financially that he was able to give, but he gave a lot in terms of his time to LCF. He stated, quote, in kind, he gave a full employee's worth of time, although it's a side project.
Yeah, it's like you're working on a snowmobile in the garage and you put a lot of money into it, but you love it. And it ruins your life.
Luginbilled had mentioned reimbursements with contractors numerous times. I asked if this had been related to the Smile House. He stated it was. He indicated that LCF had not owned the Smile House, but had an agreement with the owner, as we know.
Yes.
He did not have adequate funds to renovate the house properly, which then fell to LCF to fund this. He stated the construction workers were paid through workforce resource. I believe that there was like a grant provided that came through workforce resource. We discussed this to some degree with a previous story that we did all about this, right? But that story didn't really focus on how that all came to be.
Yeah.
And that's a piece that's been hard for me to get any like concrete information on.
At the very least, Joe was able to utilize this workforce that was being paid by somebody else.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the Smile House. Boy, the resources required to even start that. It's just like, yeah, we didn't have any money, it turns out. We tore apart a house and then
left the homeowner to deal with it. Yeah. Luginbilled stated the agreement signed with the owner of the Smile House was that LCF would provide funds to pay for staff at Smile House once it opened in the fall, but the renovation cost was on the homeowner, Josh Bushland. Luginbilled stated the renovation cost aspect had not been included in the signed contract, but it had been his assumption when he signed it that the homeowner was going to be responsible for this. However, when the renovations started, the homeowner indicated they did not have the funds to do a renovation.
It is interesting to listen to Joe give his take on like so many of the topics we touched in the first season.
Yeah, it sure is. Yes. He stated LCF had no stable income sources, which was one of the downsides of the organization. Ultimately, he stated it was, quote, all over the place with regards to the amount of funds LCF would take in per month. I asked how people were able to donate to LCF. He stated LCF did not do cash. He stated most donations were made online and some people mailed checks. He indicated the public, quote, hype for LCF definitely overshadowed the amount of money received, which I think might be correct.
That feels honest. Yeah.
I will state here, in the time doing all of this, speaking with people, one thing that has come up more than one time from Joe to the party that I spoke with, like, he indicated that he deliberately liked to do things with cash for obvious reasons. I don't know how much of the transactions related to LCF were actually done in cash.
Yeah, unless it's like a jelly bean jar. Like, how are you taking palms of cash?
How
in as
many people would
donation?
just give cash? I don't know.
And maybe that, I don't even think this is a critique of Joe. Maybe the Eau Claire public at large. If what was happening was like, Joe is a rising star, we love what he's doing, he's got these projects, everyone was so into it, and nobody was donating. I don't know. Must be frustrating. We can't wait for that Smile House, Joe.
Yeah. I asked Luginbilled if he had ever taken out any loans for LCF. He indicated he considered doing this for the Smile House and the State Theater, but he had not done that. So he said he had not taken out any loans for LCF, which we know from previous episodes here. There were 2 known online loans, Silver Cloud Financial and Rise Credit. I asked about some various documents he kept: invoices, records for scholarship recipients, LCF costs for fundraisers, reimbursements, etc. I advised I could send him an email with some documents to look for and asked if he would be able to email them to me. He stated he could certainly do that. He indicated he did not have all the documents, but he could send me what was on his laptop. I advised during the following week I would send him an email of documents to look for. I asked if he knew how much money was left in the LCF accounts. He stated he didn't have the numbers in front of him, but the Andrew Cree account still had about $12,000 to $13,000 left in it, and the Smile House Fund had about $7,000 left in it. On 5/27/2020, I sent Luginbilled an email requesting for various documents pertaining to LCF. On 5/28/2020, Luginbilled responded via email acknowledging he got the email, would search his laptop and send me what he have. On 6/15/2020, I still had not received a response from Luginbilled and sent him a follow-up email inquiring about the status of any records for LCF. This one's called Documents Received from Joe Luginbilled, 6/21/2020. So remember, she emailed Joe on 5/27/2020 and gave him a list of things she was looking for. This is like somebody who works for the police department.
That's what makes me think that this isn't like, he couldn't possibly be like, yeah, I'm gonna give the cops the runaround. Like,
on 6/15/2020, I still had not received a response from Luginbilled and sent him a follow-up email inquiring about the status of any records for LCF. On 6/21/2020, Luginbilled sent me a Google Docs folder to open. The 10 documents contained in the folder were Certificate of Status. You can get that. He doesn't need to provide that. Showed LCF was registered as a domestic corporation or domestic LLC through Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions. You can get that without Joe Luginbilled. Certification of filing. Showed same document as above through Wisconsin DFI. I have that.
Technically a different document. That's 2. All right.
EIN, Luginbilled Children's Foundation, dated letter from IRS indicating employer identification number has been assigned to LCF. Lease agreement, State Theater draft. This was a draft copy of the lease between LCF, Joe Luginbilled, and Azara Properties for the rental of the State Theater. The lease did indicate the rent per month was $2,500, and all other expenses, utilities, were the responsibility of the tenant. The lease also indicated a need for the tenant to have insurance.
It was also a draft, so none of this is really worth anything.
Right.
Okay.
Lismore contract. A copy of a contract between Lismore Hotel and LCF Joe Luginbilled for the rental of space at the Lismore for an LCF event. I believe this was a scholarship fundraising type event. The contract was signed on 4/20/2018 for an event on Friday, May 4th, 2018. The rental amount was $750 and required $500 payment upfront for the space.
Is it mentioned what documents were requested?
No, it's not. Luginbilled Foundation Business Owners Policy Down Payment. This was a copy of a business owner's policy for LCF to have insurance at 316 Eau Claire Street, which is the State Theater. The invoice was dated 4/8/2019 for insurance beginning on 4/9/2019 and expiring on 4/9/2020. The total cost listed was $1,573.40. The insurance company was CoverWallet. Luginbilled Foundation Insurance Policy. This was a copy of the CoverWallet policy with details. This document indicated the total premium due was $4,892. Print order. This was an invoice from Charity Grow dated 2/7/2017 to LCF for charity auction items. The payment total showed was $3,293, which was paid using card ending 2586. Workforce Construction Training Program. This was a document showing information from Workforce Development, quote, Construction 101 program that was to be held in the State Theater. The start was to be determined. I think that document has to do with a space that Workforce Resource may be occupied in the State Theater. Like, we know that there were other nonprofits that occupied space in the State Theater once Joe sort of became an acting property manager.
Yeah.
I think Workforce Resource was one of those spaces.
Wait, so did Workforce plan to have an office there?
I believe
in
so.
addition to the workforce working at the State Theater?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Document 9. A napkin, upon which is written the word smile.
On 6/22/2020, I did send Luginbill an email indicating I received the 10 documents and indicated for him to let me know if he had any other further documents to submit. As of 8/20/2020, I did not receive any further correspondence, either via phone or email from Luginbill pertaining to this email. End of report. All right. Luginbilled Children's Foundation Overall Analysis. In this supplement, the intent is to provide an overall analysis on the use of Luginbilled Children's Foundation funds, in particular focusing on funds that appear to be for personal use. As part of this investigation, I had inspected and saved information from the Luginbilled Children's Foundation website, which is now no longer operational. The Luginbilled Children's Foundation also had a PDF document of bylaws on its website. Within this document, under Section 4 and 5 of Article 5, there was information pertaining to the president and treasurer of the Luginbilled Children's Foundation and finances. Under the president section, it read, "The president and vice president may sign checks if the treasurer is not available, provided that if the check is in excess of $500, it is countersigned by one other individual authorized to do so by the board." Under the treasurer section, it read, "He/she shall also sign all checks, drafts, notes, and orders for the payment of money, which shall be duly authorized by the board of directors and shall be countersigned by another authorized individual when exceeding the amount of $500. Despite this information, which was available to the public on the Luginbilled Children's Foundation website, Joe Luginbill was listed as the only signer on the Andrew Crane Memorial Scholarship account through Charter Bank. These LCF bylaws also had a section under Article 5 that read, "The Board of Directors may employ staff and personnel with such titles as the Board of Directors shall determine according to the available administrative funds and needs of LCF. The Board of Directors shall establish a rate of compensation and benefits for the personnel." So then there is like a list of the different accounts. I will go over the dollar amounts. really quickly. Based on the timeframes of when these different accounts were opened, the Royal Credit Union accounts for LCF had been opened first in December 2016 when LCF was first founded. The primary RCU LCF account was used. It was likely due to this being a checking account, while the other LCF accounts were savings accounts. Between December 2016 and December 2017, there had been approximately $50,000 in funds that had been deposited and withdrawn from the account. After December 2017, the account balance remained at $2.85 before the account was closed in July 2019. LCF RCU account ending in 1553 only had a total value of $5 deposited and withdrawn. LCF RCU account ending in 1579 only had a total value of 1 cent deposited and withdrawn. LCF RCU account ending in 1587 had approximately $21,000 in total that had been deposited and withdrawn from the account. In addition, with my analysis of LCF funds at a charter bank when completing the overall analysis and combining charter bank data with RCU data, I combined the total amount of funds being deposited and withdrawn. This is what we really want.
Yeah.
From these accounts over the course of the accounts to the most recent subpoenaed data, the rationale for combining the total amount of funds from all the various LCF accounts was there appeared to be numerous transfers of funds between the LCF accounts, where a primary account was utilized at RCU and Charter Bank. As a result, it made more sense to look at the overall totals of funds rather than the individual accounts. Overall, between December 2016 and June 2020, there had been approximately $150,000 deposited and withdrawn from the combined LCF accounts. This would provide a very rough estimate that LCF had brought in approximately $50,000 or less each year in donations for the years 2017, 2018, 2019. This would be a rough estimate, as the various online transfers of funds between the various LCF accounts did make it difficult to determine deposits totaled, which, yes, I bet it was very difficult.
I thought it was absurd before to not be keeping records with the amount of money I
so
thought he was
many
dealing
accounts.
with. Like, don't handle that much
Oh
money
my
if
God.
if you're like, you know what, not good at the numbers.
Some of these accounts had like 1 cent in them, so then it is sort of like, why was that an account? You know what I mean?
Because that interest, you know.
Yeah. This rough estimate would have to use the assumption that all donations had been deposited into the LCF accounts, which was found to not be true. The deposit of LCF donations into Joseph Luginbill's personal account will be discussed in a future section. What did hold true for LCF was that during the entire course of the charity's existence, there had always been a bank account in LCF's name. Joe Luginbill had several personal bank accounts. When I refer to personal bank accounts, I'm referring to bank accounts where Luginbill opened the account in his name rather than that of Luginbill Children's Foundation. I classified Luginbill's accounts located at Bank of America as personal accounts, as he had opened these accounts in his name rather than the name of the charity. When I had spoken with Luginbill previously on the phone, he indicated he had transferred thousands of dollars in LCF funds to the Bank of America.
He moves between banks the way outlaw cowboy gangs have to pick up and run every time the cops catch on to him. A lifetime spent running one bank to the next.
I mean, yeah. However, when examining the accounts at Bank of America, this did not appear to be true. Bank of America did not provide any returns for any accounts under LCF, for which I had provided the EIN to search for. The Bank of America account did have a charity check deposited into it, along with Luginbill's tax refund and personal income from, quote, ASF payroll. Although numerous personal and charitable bank accounts were discussed in the above section, it is likely there were other personal bank accounts for Luginbilled that were not identified. So, we are on to our last section. Discrepancies with the Joe Luginbilled interview. When interviewing Joe Luginbilled, there were numerous statements he made that were either untrue or conflicted with the evidence I had obtained during the course of this investigation. The intent of this section is to focus on some of these discrepancies. While speaking with Luginbilled, he indicated he did not receive any form of income from LCF. Yet, on the RISE application form for the loan, he indicated his main source of income was via his self-employment through LCF, where he made $2,900 a month. There were several issues with this. First, the bylaws on the LCF website indicated the Board of Directors may employ staff and personnel with such titles as the Board of Directors shall determine according to the available administrative funds and needs of LCF. The Board of Directors shall establish the rate of compensation and benefits for personnel.
Well, that discrepancy I can explain. Those bylaws were written by the company he hired way back at the start, and he's never actually read them, which is why nothing lines up.
That does explain it. This posed an issue as the Board of Directors were Luginbill's family. Mm-hmm. And through my conversation with Dennis Luginbilled, he indicated he was not actually on the board, and the board was only in place for paperwork purposes. As a result, Luginbilled could choose to establish any sort of income he would want, with there being no proper checks and balances in place as he was a, quote, board of one person. Second, it would be mathematically and logically incorrect to believe Luginbilled would be receiving $2,900 per month in financial compensation from LCF. The reason I draw this conclusion is because over the course of LCF, the charity only had approximately $150,000 in donations. If Luginbilled were to be paid $2,900 per month, he would be paid $34,800 per year, which would be approximately 70% of the incoming funds for LCF being paid to Luginbilled.
So some of these are discrepancies, and some of these are hard and fast conflicts with the mathematical laws of reality.
You got it.
Okay.
This is why it is unreasonable to believe Luginbilled would have been paid this substantially for his role in the charity, if at all, as he indicated he was not financially compensated. If it was made aware to the general public for each dollar they donated to LCF that Luginbilled would retain approximately 70 cents worth, no one would donate to the charity as there would be hardly any charitable funds left after paying Luginbilled. Luginbilled had also indicated to me there had been no commingling of personal and charitable funds. This was clearly not true, as Luginbilled had 2 bank accounts through RCU prior to LCF coming into existence that after he opened accounts for LCF, he then proceeded to funnel online LCF Square Inc. donations into his personal account. Luginbilled indicated he had not used any of the charity funds for his personal use, yet there were numerous payments from the LCF accounts for personal use, and numerous times after LCF donations were deposited into Luginbill's negative balanced personal account that the funds appeared to be for personal use. Luginbilled indicated there was an LCF charity account through Bank of America, yet when subpoenaed records were obtained from Bank of America, there was only a personal checking and personal savings account located. Luginbilled also claimed there had been approximately $12,000 to $13,000 in the Andrew Cray account and $7,000 in the Smile House account, yet subpoenaed records for both Charter Bank and Bank of America did not show anywhere near this substantial amount of funds left in them. Based on my phone conversation with Luginbilled, it led me to believe he was providing me with a false narrative of information he thought I would like to hear, so he did not get into trouble.
Oh, it's the little comments that really
Yeah.
I think he didn't want to get in trouble. And I think he probably thought he could get away with this because, look, I got money here, I got money there. What are you going to do? Categorize every transaction I've ever done?
Right.
That's impossible.
As a result, it is difficult to determine what information Luginbilled provided was truthful versus untruthful, unless there was supporting evidence to back up the claim. Conclusion. When inspecting simply one aspect of this investigation as a whole, one might be inclined to believe Joseph Luginbill simply mismanaged and or commingled some of the LCF funds on a few occasions. However, when combining all the information obtained throughout the course of this investigation, it becomes quite clear that Luginbill used substantial amounts of charitable funds for his personal use. There were hundreds of debit card transactions from the LCF accounts that appeared personal in nature. There were thousands of dollars in online LCF charity donations deposited into Luginbill's personal account. And there were numerous questionable reimbursements Luginbill had made to himself from the LCF charity account. Although Luginbill did appear to use some funds from his personal account towards LCF, there was still a discrepancy of approximately $22,000 in funds that appeared to have benefited Luginbill in a personal capacity. End of report.
Can you imagine what the red yarn splay across this
gosh.
detective's four walls of their bedroom must look like? You know, it seems small, but when it spider webs out.
No kidding. On 8/25/2020, I emailed ADA Robert Stoiber a copy of the supplement in this case titled Luginbill Children's Foundation Overall Analysis. In the email, I explained that my analysis showed Luginbill had used a substantial amount of funds for his personal use. And although he used some personal funds for charitable use, there was still a substantial discrepancy. I expressed that an order and arrest for theft by false representation and obstructing was appropriate. On 9/16/2020, I received an email response from ADA Stoiber requesting the case be referred to the DA's office for their review and charging consideration. Records provided the entire case file to the DA's office on a disk 10/28/2020. 10/26/2021. Charging decision, Erica Strassman. The DA's office has made the decision not to prosecute this case. The case status will be changed to reflect that decision.
Luginbilled is presented by Cool and Unusual Punishment. Research and story by Jody Haas, with editing and mixing by me. Music by Zavely, Rick Dickert, AG Music, Rockhot, John Wright, and Christian Ayan. This podcast is a proud member of the Nerd and Tie Network, a coalition of Wisconsin-produced shows that you can find at nerdandtie.com. Our website, where you can find a link to the full report from this episode, is coolandunusualpunishment.com. What was that jam session like?
I mean, I don't
What was the Chip the Cat jam session like?